Hello everyone, I'm Yuri Grigorian. I'm an architect. I'm a part of Library for Architecture team. And our today's event is the part of our year program, which is 12 months of curatorship of every of the founders. I'm one of the founders. So this month, we decided to invite, together with an Untitled Architecture, who is the Bogdan Peric, our friend, and Meganum, we decided to invite our friends and best architects of Italy and Milano. And Cino Zucchi is one of them, and he will be soon on the stage. And the topic of the month is ordinary architecture, and our interest specifically is the connection with the theory embedded in the practice of every architect. And we want to thank National Library of Armenia, where we are now, and this is the great room and great opportunity. We want to say thank you to Green Construction, and Artashes is here, and Glasswork and Casa Rica. And our program is ongoing. I mean, the month is not ended, and you will see more events. And now I am giving floor to Cino for your lecture, please. Cino Zucchi.
Thank you, Yuri, and thank everybody at Library of Architecture, which sounds very interesting. I also teach in the university, and we were talking about institutions today. And of course, universities are very important places, but I think there's some kind of debate which is crossing between, first of all, practice and university, because at times universities tend to be a bit academical, I would say, in a good and bad sense. In a way, they transmit knowledge, but many times they don't cross reference with culture. And architecture has always been, as Yuri said, a very particular discipline. I will die without knowing if architecture is art or not. Some people think it is, some people not. It is true that in the European tradition, well, not just European, there's a lot of abstract speculation about geometry, construction, so architecture is basically an empirical discipline, but it generated and crossbreeded with a lot of arts and sciences and philosophy. When architects get too theoretical, they start only to talk, and then when you see the work, say, where all this talk went. When they get too practical, they seem to need some kind of more general framework, especially in a world that today it's very, the ideas are changing very fast. First of all, I want to excuse myself to this change of program. The plane was late, so we had a bit of a strange 2 days on a plane, and I'm very grateful to the people being here, even if we changed the date, and I'm grateful, of course, to the certification. So sit back and relax, because I felt obliged to bring a lot of things here. Was once occasion, I said, so it's going to be a long lecture, but hopefully we leave some time after for discussion. It would be interesting to raise some arguments that could be discussed. And I tried to put together a first part, which has a more abstract reflections. I don't know. Actually, the title, it's a bit ironical, as you can understand. But then you will discover the meaning of the title in some time during the lecture. And let's say my reflection will be about a certain degree of slowness of the architectural response to the functional program, in a way, and I will try to explain better what I'm saying. So I think if we start from empiricism, try to do things, the first act of architecture is piling stones and putting sticks together, like as a primitive man. Man has a privilege to write down the knowledge. The writing, in a way, was important. Today you have Wikipedia. You can learn to build the bomb or whatever on Wikipedia. Young people, they don't need to be learned anymore because it's, but even writing, this is a series of manuals which say you can do everything. You say how to get thin, how to talk in public, how to get women, how to become famous, the art of... We try to do things, but then when people are good enough, they feel the need to put down what they know and communicate to others. So in a way, the transmission of knowledge, it creates some kind of overlay, which also help people to get better. But then, you could say for a long time, traditional crafts and architecture, in a way, went into the young apprentice has to learn what the father does, say, do this way, don't do it the other way. Classical architecture students, they studied classes, columns with ionic volutes and so on. So there was an established set of things which were considered needed to the young person to learn, or in a souk, you go and see these people, young people learning how to do things. Innovations was not that fast, and basically you work on consolidated models, the traditional way of teaching. There's a very nice book by Christopher Alexander. It's called Notes on the Synthesis of Form, and he says in traditional craftsmanship you only imitate somebody else, and you tell the person what to do, but you don't explain why that should be. Modernism is marked by a separation of what we could call method from practice. So this sort of abstract, which is also quite important. This phrase of Wittgenstein, which is 100 years ago, say, okay, we teach how to do things, but then in a modern world, the question is why to play this game and why to play it right now. I, for example, have students from China, from Peru, who I teach in English, and you realize that the education of these people is very, very different. It's very stimulating, but what is considered the discipline of architecture, apart from just technical things like statics and things which are quite common, it's very different. So in a way, I think today is what is the right game to play? It's a big question, more than in traditional societies. But then there was a moment where this traditional way seemed to not work very much. This was something at the beginning of last century. People saw that technology was developing, the problem was new. So architects, they say around 1920, they said, okay, maybe let's wipe away memory. We start from new. We start from the problem. So instead of keeping on this knowledge, we start from observing what is there. And this was, in a way, I'm simplifying a bit, functionalism attitude. No. So in a way, the process was trying to become a bit scientific, and the input method output model was tried to transfer to architecture. We all know what is an input-output model. When you press the pedal, you go faster, and when you take out the pedal, it goes slower. So this is very simple. The input is your foot, and the output is speed. But then there's a moment, some system where this relationship is not instant. The output, it takes a bit of time after the input. This I took from my grandfather's he was a Marxist, but when he died, he was very left-wing, but I found this erotic manual after Marx's Capital. And so if today you want to make a kid, or you don't want to make a kid, because they're all dressed up in this thing. This was 100 Positions of Love, the manual of sex for my grandfather. But then this is a diagram of the population in Japan split up in ages. So just after the war, there were very, very, very few old people and a lot of young people, and then as we go on, this changes. We are going to a which means the act we do today, the result of the act we do today is not instant. It happened during the COVID, for example. The COVID, our architects started to make designers of things, but things were changing so fast that as soon as the output went there, the problem was even changed. This is a famous Italian politician, and sort of showman, Vittorio Sgarbi, whose opening a building we did is the opening of the building. But today, a politician, in Italy, governments last 4 or 5 years or something like that. Many times for things like a subway or something, it could be that the politicians will open or inaugurate the work of the previous one. This is also a problem also for architecture because, for example, in Milano, you have what is called tactical urbanism. Basically, they go to a place, they paint the sidewalk. It's very successful over in 2 days, and politicians communicate it. It's very nice. But for a politician to take a long program, many times the inconvenient, like building a subway, they just opened a subway in Milano, but for like 10 years, it was works all over. So the times of politics, sometimes they're too short for the times of architecture even. So politicians prefer fastly communicating things. But then let's accept for a moment this input black box, some kind of method output model. If architecture is some kind of machine to crank on things, what is the input? In old times, we say the architect was a learned man. You have this Viennese architect called Adolf Loos, who has this famous phrase, the architect is a bricklayer knowing Latin. So he's somebody who has the techniques of making a wall, but he also has culture. Palladio was really a poor man, and a nobleman took him. He was very good in drafting. He made him study. He sent him to Rome, and these are the drawings of Palladio, measure drawings, original drawings, measuring Roman ruins. And then he did the Rotonda villa, which actually looks a bit like a temple. So in a way, at that time, the architect distinguished himself in a Renaissance from just the mason in the Gothic times because he had also, in this case, antiquity and Vitruvian culture. But in a way, the things were joined. But then today, if you look at newspapers, we have the popular view of the architect is twofold. On one side, once I met Bernard Schumi, he's a Swiss architect in Milano, and he was around with some students in Milano, and he said, Cino Zucchi, today you have only two kinds of architects. The signature architects who go, and he went like this. And then the production architects could put elevators. I was talking with Yuri before about, we also have building by Zadi, Libeskin, and so on, this spectacularity. So a lot of my students, they think building is boring, it's just a box, and then architecture is like a drunk state of the building, is a building all going like this. And maybe this is not totally the case, but this component. In this case, we had Carlo Mollino. He was also a bit of a pornographer. He did a lot of erotic thing, and then he did this discotheque. So many times the architects today say, I took my ideas from the clouds, the nature. They use a lot of natural metaphors. This inspiration. I don't need to justify the procedure I go there. Of course, the other side, this is, France destroyed by the war, and Jean Prouvé with a team of other architects, they had to give a lot of houses for the people who were homeless, to use technology of aluminum. So the idea that an architect is somebody who has a knowledge and put it at the service of the people, which is in a way complementary to the first one you see. And many times the mission for us on the newspapers is, you architects had the fantasy to do things. Many times engineers I work with, they say, I don't know anything about form. You're the creative one. Put some color on the facades. Like there's a process, and the architect is like somebody, spraying some whipped cream on a cake. It's doing almost just And then the other one is this idea that it's not me designing. We work with Norman Foster in England, and then, it's the wind which shapes the building. It's not really true, but the rhetoric is not me doing the form, is the analysis of the ray of the sun. Today with artificial intelligence, you can do a lot. Again, going back to the notion of how to do things. Duran was one of the main, let's say, classical architects in France. We could make a whole story about l'architecture des beaux-arts. And this is the frontispiece of his book, Précis d'architecture, and he says, marche à suivre dans la composition du projet quelconque. Steps to follow in the composition of any project. First one, you do the axis of symmetry, you do the minor axis, then you put the walls, then you put the columns, and 5, here's the building. It works for everybody. In a way, classicism, you can be more or less talented, but as I give you a method, I would say, where is a Lego system where the bricks are columns or pantheons. In a way, this is the pantheon used as a brick, as a Lego. And everybody can do it. The power of classicism is this. You don't need much inspiration. If you, in a way, copy well, I'm saying in a positive sense, you can get there. So in a way, Duran is like, how to draw a cat. You make this, and this, and then everybody can draw a cat. But then this idea of method, all this attempt of the modernists to give a scientific status to architecture. I typed method on internet, and as everybody has a diet, the ketogenic diet, I was 12 kilos less, now I got back with the ketogenic. Everybody can invent a diet, and everybody can invent a method. What is a method? It's like a flow chart. If you go step 1, step 2, step 3, maybe with some feedback, you can get there. The ideal of methodology or procedure as opposed to that, which we respect, of course, today. You need a lot of scientific. But is there a way to go all this way? And if we zoom back to the city, we could say that we all lived in a traditional city. We felt quite right. Things were there. But then there was a moment where modernism thought you could apply the same method to the city. And these are typical ideas from the, say, 1950s or 60s. This is Victor Gruen, ideal city. And then my father, in 1964, went to America. He brought me back a book. It's called The World of Tomorrow. And the cover was this image. And this image was from a big model they had at the New York Fair of the city of tomorrow. And this also symbolized for me the way functionists looked at the city. They say, we forget the past. We start from the function of dwelling, the function of working, the function of moving with cars, and so on, and then we assemble all together. And this is, actually, when I was a kid, I was totally sure I would have lived in this kind of future city. So the last century generated a lot of ideal city. This is Brodacra by Frank Lloyd Wright. Actually, this summer I was in New York. I saw Yuri's skyscraper coming up. And there was the big model in the MoMA. This is not a picture, but it's incredible. This, in a way, Frank Lloyd Wright was saying, now that we have communication with TV and telephones, people can live apart. We don't need a city anymore. So Brodacra City was the idea to mix city with country. But this is the model of Chandigarh. Chandigarh has a very complex political history. It was created in India when the Muslims separated from the Hindu. In a way, Pakistan, a lot of Muslim people migrated to Pakistan. So this actually is the model in the mayor's office in Chandigarh. Actually, when we were in school, they made us study this, very important. This was the capital by Le Corbusier. He had the buildings, was the center of the administration. You had, the offices, the parliament, and the law offices separated by this very big promenade. But then I never went there, so maybe this was 10 years ago. They invited me to do a lecture there. and it was very interesting. I went down, and I went to visit, what I always studied on my books. This is to get in, you needed to go through a checkpoint. And then, in the middle of this esplanade, since they had some kind of terrorist attack, this was also another checkpoint. So what was, for Le Corbusier, the civil forum of the people going together, we're looking at the law offices. Then we have fragments of, in a way, I would say, Le Corbusier's signature in everyday life. Some of it is quite interesting. And Le Corbusier invented this very famous brise-soleil, break the sun to shadow, but, the place is very damp. India is not just hot, but it's damp. So the brise-soleil is the sun, but they don't take away the humidity. So they don't work as well, and everybody put air conditioning on it. And the parliament, the symbol of democracy, all with barbed wire. And actually, the mayor of Chandika called me and said, Cino Zucchi, I want a suggestion from you. What's his name? UNESCO proposed to become the World Heritage. You have these things. But then we still have the Le Corbusier prescription, the way you do, he did the urban plan, but also some architectural issues about rhythm and concrete. We would like to do it, but can you fix the whole city this way? This is the market square. In a way, it's a utopia, good, bad. Some things are quite good, actually. After 50 years, normal people. You could say today you talk about resilience, about post-production. So this is the poetics of Le Corbusier, very abstract, with a lot of we call it béton brut, naked concrete. After that. So I'm very interested. We went also to Brasilia this summer. Also, Brasilia is another utopia. I don't have pictures here, but Brasilia is the same. For example, one joke about Brasilia was, Brasilia is fantastic. It's only made for the car. You can only go around with car, also a bit here. And he said, too bad that the blocks of the coffee is 3 blocks away from the blocks of the sugar. You have it's not really a block, zone of all churches, all the embassies here, all the hotels are here. Very strange, and in Chandigarh a bit too. On the side, certain things work quite well. We cannot say everything. For the traffic, work quite well. So today, you talk a lot about people's participation. We felt architects, they pretended a lot of things, but they were imposing things. So this idea of the feedback of the response also have some kind of, let's say, mathematical thing. So you have an input, some kind of elaboration, you have an output, but then you have what is called the retroaction, the feedback, and through evolve, the feedback can change the input. The most thing is the thermostat. This night I was a little bit cold. I put the thermostat on 24. My wife said, how much did you put it? I cheated her, because we have a different perception. The thermostat, it means if you put it 24, it generates heat, and then it should stop when 24 is reached, it stops. And the process of the feedback can be both re-equilibrating. For example, in an airplane, why do you have main wings and the tail? Because if the airplane goes this way, this gets more wind and tends to stabilize in a way. If you only have wing, you can have that. This generates a counteraction. So this is a case of self-stabilizing feedback, and the reverse is the feedback we hear in the microphone. If the microphone is too loud, it goes into a loudspeaker, my voice out, and then you have to whistle. So you have different kind of feedbacks. But even in feedback, you can have the time factor. So a feedback can exist but be delayed. And these were the names of my lecture campsites. If you go, if you go in a campsite, maybe in the winter you get to run and you want a hot shower, you go in the shower, you turn the hot water. For a while, nothing happens because it takes some time to the water to go through. So you turn, and the water is still cold. And then it gets too hot, and then it's like this. So you turn it again back, and nothing happens. It still stays hot a while. And you go back and forth until it gets right. There's also the mathematics of it. This delay, And one could say you need patience. You don't have to oversteer. So the Campside Shower Theory is taken as a metaphor of an architecture who is willing to take some inputs, but it takes some time to elaborate. By the time architecture is done, the inputs are quite different. We won a competition for the Lavazza Coffee headquarters. The program was like 700 employees, and then we did the project with all the details, this and that, and then they had an acquisition. Basically, while we were doing the project, they changed the program by 200 people, which is a lot. We'd have to take away one floor, put again one floor, this, as the company was doing. And every time, it took 1 year to catch up with the project. So you have the mathematics of slowness. I don't explain the linguistic diagram. And you can say a city is also a self-feedback system. When they announce bad weather, in Milano, from some secret patches, you have all these, people selling, umbrellas in front of the university. When they announce a soccer thing, all of a sudden these people appear and they sell scarves, maybe digitally printed with, the last things. So a city is a system of people who keep on working on the feedback. It's transforming in a very short. These are very short time phenomena. You have cases, for example, my wife now is nervous because she wants to smoke her electronic cigarette. Yesterday on the plane, he said, Cino, stay there. I try, she was trying to hide. She felt this. But in Italy, you have the board of electronic cigarettes. At the beginning, say you can smoke them everywhere. But then, so all these shops came up, and you have graphics, people. So you have changes in the economy of the world, the techniques, which generate rather fast changes in the city. But then if they say electronic cigarettes are bad, all these people will go out of business and so on. Benetton invented what is called tinto in filo, tinto in capo, dyed in a piece. The old textile people used to do blue jackets, red jackets, and produce them. What he did all white pants, then he put some colors, he sent them in a shop, and then if everybody buy pink pants, he dyes the pants not before they're woven, but after, so he can quickly respond to the market. He invented this device. It's a society where both modernism and socialism were looking for the modern man, but was an archetype, the man with the thing like this, the woman with the baby like this. If you think of social realism, but also not so far from this, the new man was a typological man. You do one prototype house, and then you reproduce it by 1,000. You have a lot of prefabricated houses there. It was given for the needs of everybody, and the idea that people can be different was not so taken. Today, the marketing is insisting on that. We went from a standard man to the marketing tried to chase you in all kind of your own thing. Oh, you're so unique, you think with your own head. You have Michael Jordan making advertisement for Nike. Oh, you think different, you're alone. It's so stupid in a way. So this idea of personalization, it's also some kind of obsession of when you go on internet, you have all these choices. Sometimes you have so many choices, this menu, the roll-down menu, you don't know what to choose. Can we consider today culture as some kind of progressive, almost a Darwinistic view, where you have an idea, a person has maybe a joke, he has a way of saying, and then we are also imitators. So instead of stating big system of thoughts which emanate, can we think of single initiatives that catch up? Today we use words like resilient, inclusive, this word, also fashionable words almost. So Dan Sperber, he made this book about explaining culture, and he has this attitude of the idea that culture is like a virus. It's like ideas repeating themselves and communicating one to each other. So I always thought in Italian it's called telefono senza fili, telephone without wires. In English it's called Chinese whisper. It's a game where you whisper in somebody else and then you make the round and see how this is the form. I think gossip is very important in the history of culture. And this is a series of photographers from Holland. They go around Milano, maybe Yerevan like this. They take people from the street, they take them to the studio, and they take pictures of them. And I think they're very funny because we all think we are unique, but there's at least 12 Cino Zucchi, 12 Yuri Gregorian, 12 like this, all the same. This is, the names are fantastic. Some are cappuccino girls, the other ones like volunteers. These are Pokemons. These are typical Milanese intellectuals, coming there, explaining films to their girlfriend. I love these because they all feel casual. They all have this. This is fantastic. It's the idea or I just came out of the bathroom with my things out, but it's a fashion. So I find this. So what's the relation today between individuality and this kind of spreading out? These are just pictures of facades in Milano I took from my Vespa going to the Politecnico. And of course I framed it in a right way, but after the Second World War they built a lot of this housing with these sort of screen facades. And even if none of them are particularly exciting from the architectural point of view, all they make some kind of background which gives some kind of custom or common mood. For my grandmother, actually, we lived there. What I find it interesting also is that how can I say, the relationship between each person living there, one has a dog, one has a cat, one likes flowers, one has a lot of shoes, he puts this up, and the city. What is a facade in a way, or a deep facade? The screen between the individual and the collective. We need some kind of buffer. If anybody would express their problems to anybody else, it would be a mess. If you go on a train, you don't want the train guy say, oh, my girlfriend left me, I'm so sad. Drive your train, please, and get me safe there. So we want to express each other, but society needs some kind of screen. And in a way, a balcony is the screen between the individuality of each person and the common space of this. This again, talking about repetition and fashion, there's on internet you can go, Ngram is called. It gives you the frequency of how often the words are used in language, and I put resilience, sustainability, resilience, inclusive, biodiverse, and in architects' reports, these are very important matters. I think we do a very sustainable architecture, we do a very inclusive architecture. I think resilience is a very good word. But the way people start using them, they repeat journalists, and then they become a bit, nobody knows really what biodiversity is. In this mechanism of progressive copies, something is always transformed. This is very Darwinian. When you had Roman coins, then in barbarous times, they used to reproduce them. They copied the coin, but the second and third reproduction forgot the original iconic. There was a head or some horses, and then they just... So I like how this process always is not fixed. It changes over time. Can we study even the history of techniques? These are famous photographers called Ben and Ina Becker. They go to, let's say, take pictures of human artifacts like they would be almost insects or trees. In a way, even what we do is also a variation about innovation and imitation of types. Could we have, again, a Darwinistic view of the city, the human culture, in a way, cell phones or guitars, things could, also an evolutionary view. And in a way, but while the first degree of evolution went into a linear mode, in reality, we need a lot of dead branches. The Neanderthal man almost disappeared, nobody knows why. or horses. So for any successful line, from the primeval horse to the nowadays, or even human, you have a lot of mistakes. In a way, 99% of the species were extinct. So it's not a line, it's a bush. And actually, this is the original sketch by Darwin representing evolution as a bush more than a line. And if you think how things variate, I just knew this very, very famous meme, keep calm and carry on. And yesterday explained me it comes from the Second World War. I didn't know that. And you have all these variations. I would conceive, even architecture, some kind of ideas that get successful and spread, and then they get so boring and obsolete, like in fashion sometimes, that somebody else starts a new one and then happens again. I'm not talking architecture as fashion. It's a general model of viewing cultures. And looking at our work, which is doing models, 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 we did a competition. Actually, Morphosis won this competition. It was a complex of offices in Milano. And we did a lot of models. And then I sketched, and for fun, after I sketched, I took all my sketches and put them in a sort of evolutionary line. You have some initial sketches which are similar in a way to the final one, but not it. So even in architecture, this is the final model represented, is the survival of the fittest, the way we work. So this is what Samuel Beckett used to say, try again, fail better. I tend to tell my students failure is part of the game, but even entrepreneurs, they think architects knows everything. Maybe I don't show everything to my client, but many times it happens to me that the first sketch, it will become the thing. Many times I do many sketches, and some of them are thrown away. So basically, I'm trying to debate the issue of time. This is Piranesi's view of this strange sarcophagus in Appia, and this is an actual photograph today. In the way he saw it, it's the same objects in a way. So architecture is produced by a program, finance, some political acceptance, some person needs, many things. When it's born, architecture has to respond to many different needs. But once it's done, the question is that usually the architecture product survives a long time after the original problem is gone. That's my point. And products which are too fastly designed for the end. I'm doing a master plan in Bergamo now, and we almost finished the master plan, and then my client called a commercial expert. It's a master plan, it's not. And they were talking about commercial continuity, and he's pushing me. We have a bridge over the station, but then we go down to the level of the city. This guy say, once you go up, people do not like. Basically, he wants to make me almost an open-air commercial center of 1 kilometer round, and he's right in his own terms. He's a commercial expert. He does a lot of. Say, this is not a commercial center, it's a city. So if you do just this aerial passage, every time you go to the city, you have to go ramp up. So say that the commercial centers in America, the perfect machines, there's nothing more determined than commercial centers, but then when they fail, they're gone. But then this is the Diocletian Palace in Split. It's in Croatia. It was conceived as a palace of Masfunera, and it works very well as a bar. How come many times ancient architecture survives much better to its original program? In Milano, in the northern of Italy, you have a lot of Sikh people. Sikh are from India, and they're very good in cattle, so you had a big immigration. And this is the early party of Sikhs in a very Italian square kind of thing. If we were too functionalist, this could not happen. So talking about resilience, I think that once a space is made, it can be used in ways which are very different from what it was meant for. Let's not mechanize too much the relationship between life and architecture. Milano had a very big hospital during the time of the plague, and today became the university, and we have the furniture design, the home installation, and this is the Jesuit college and became the art school. So why? Because in a way, a courtyard is a general solution where it's meant for the building, but it also contains some more general generosity, I would say, of distribution. Christopher Alexander, the one I mentioned before, he wrote in 1964 an essay which was called "A City is Not a Tree." He took the concept of a tree as a hierarchical, say, topological problem. So you have many rooms which become a living unit, many unit cells become a building, many buildings become a cluster, many clusters becomes a new town. And he says, this mode of viewing, which is quite typical of modernism, is too simple, is not redundant enough. He says the real city works instead, as he calls it, semi-lattice, where each node is connected more than one way. It was very interesting. Many, many years ago, I was in Dresden. Again, it's the 5th time I quoted my wife, but she was ill, and basically from one hotel, they had no place, and you have this big esplanade, a bit like in Berlin, Alexanderplatz, from the station. And I said, can we cross this? It's like 60 meters. And say, no, Cino, my fever is too high. Can you take me there with a car? I took the car. I went around. And after 17 kilometers, I got there because there were the roadworks. In this kind of scheme, maybe if this is electrical scheme, if this breaks, all these remain without electricity. In a way, it's a non-redundant scheme. So this hierarchical mode of modernist planning, it's fragile. Maybe grid cities are better than tree cities because they have more than one way you can get from one place to the other. It's a long question. Every day we look on magazines, these views. Architects, they like it a lot. They try to put together new research on density. We are evaluating with nature because, of course, the environmental problem is the problem of this century. These are very fascinating, but I don't think they're really cities because maybe they don't have this flexibility, resilience, robustness that cities should have, I think. Sometimes I even fear that this green obsession creates creatures which are almost non-urban. It's a very big question in European cities. These are taken from Paris reinventing cities competition. And again, I'm not at all a traditionalist, but when you go to Place des Vosges in Paris, this environmental dimension, together with a very good architecture, is a perfect square. I think that European cities still have some kind of memory, and today we're talking about inclusiveness, and I went to photograph all these benches from Place des Vosges, but you have a queer person, an immigrated person, 2 young kids, the kissers, whatever. This bench is for everybody. Now we obsess, let's do the bench for the immigrants, the bench for the old people, the bench for young people. The same bench, can welcome you the day your mother dies and you cry, or the day you win a competition, you're happy. Aren't we too much deterministic in determining architecture, who are doing social engineering through architecture? Some is very noble. Narconfin, we're talking about constructive architecture. After the First World War, Russian architecture had the lattice ideal to building a new man, and very interesting projects were there. But the partial failure is because they were a little bit too ideological in trying to generate a different behavior through architecture. We know a lot of modernist utopias who are generous intellectually, but in real life they're all broken up, people vandalize them because they're too deterministic. I think sometimes old architecture has some more generic solution more than individual one, which works better. So I said, I think that European culture has a lot of history of building and green put together and not seen as just enemies. This, in a way, is a cathedral of trees, I would say, Aix-en-Provence, Prato della Valle, and so on. And let's talk about future. Every time a journalist calls architects or architects tell us how we will live in the future, they're obsessed, or tell like we are like fortune tellers, somebody who are able to see the future. This is 2011, so again, today's futures, it will be past sometime. So if this was futurism, we should have lived this way in this moment, flying over this and that. And again, this was Allison and Peter Smithson, The House of the Future in 1955, is the day I was born, I think. Look at the man, I don't go around dressed this way. And so on. And this is the Futura house done by this Finnish architect. Again, I was totally convinced. Now they have prototypes of this, but these are the real Futura houses. And today, so there's some kind of projection in the future which is necessary, but things do not always go the way we planned. In 1963, I read this book, The Limits to Growth. It was an MIT team who was really, for the first time, using, in a way, I don't want to say artificial intelligence, but computers, to simulate things, and they would see a catastrophe around 2000-something, that the world could not go on with this model of development. This was, in a way, the connection of all their model. And I got so scared of reading this book, I applied to MIT. This is my handbook, Cino Zucchi, 1977, Artificial Intelligence. I could write in Lisp, it's an artificial intelligence language. But then what is interesting, that 30 years after this provision, they say, okay, but we did this model 30 years ago. Let's go back and see what happened. So they retook the actual data and they confronted them with the data. Some things were sort of right and certain things were not the same. So I think even future provisions should be reviews of updated from time to time. And today, in effect, we have a lot of computer simulation. We can see at this moment how many planes are around things. We can see the weather report. It's true that how do we use? I don't want to get into the matter because there's a lot of debate about artificial intelligence today. But we have models of projections which are quite good. The problem that many times they tend to project what is there, and they don't account for unpredictable things, what is called the black swans. So we have trust, very powerful, but many times, I always dress in blue, so I get advertisement of blue things because the algorithm knows that I always dress in blue, and if you want to change one day, we have to get advertisement or an orange thing. Okay, so what do we do in this condition? This first part is finished, and I'm all alone there on the table. So Cino Zucchi would say all these nice, very beautiful things, and now what you would do. So I'm not saying, many times when I was at university, I heard the lecture of my professors, and then I went to see what they did, and I think was not very good architecture, and I was very disillusioned, like you see your father with a prostitute or something. So many times I got a shock at the university when I was a student. So now that I said all this very nice theory, as an architect, in this case, I'm drawing fast. We don't choose what we do. Many times we take commissions, and many times people think architects are freer in the world than what we actually are. So we do our best, I'm not saying, but all these things I said that cannot be applied directly to my practice, of course. But let's say, just a way to organize a lot of projects are we going to show, and they're very different in scales. These are just ways to say, okay, how would you deal with this, let's say, slowness? The subtitle of my lecture was In Praise of a Just Out of Time Architecture. Clients want a just in time. They want you the day after you produce. So take your time a bit. One could be, okay, let's get it very shorter. When you have smaller commissions, many times you have to think and act quite fast. This was actually a competition we won in Lugano. They were building a new gallery, It was a big master plan, but then I will not explain each project in detail. I just taken as examples of ways of doing. There was a gallery and a big rotonda, and we proposed a big, say, raised walkway, which protected in a way from the noise and went down to the river. And then the people, so this was the project of this rotonda, and the people from the streets, they said, if you make it where it's needed as a sound barrier, we can pay for it. So it was a walkway, but also a sound protection. But then what is interesting, that the master plan went slower, and the gallery was already built, but they didn't have the roundabout. So the people from the street offices, the highway offices, called me up, said, Cino Zucchi, can you design a temporary something to hide the, let's say, the works? So this is the gallery coming out, and this is the safety thing goes in. So basically, this is an instant project we did in 15 days. It's like a wooden screen, and it's very simple. It's just wooden poles, and we put a PVC tube inside. So it's sophisticated in the way it's traced, but very simple technologically, because it's something which was meant to stay there for like 3 or 4 years. And this is the exit from the gallery. Now, actually, this is very green, but I just didn't take pictures. And what is nice is that we did no structure. These poles are 11 meters long. We accepted a bit of irregularity because we like the idea there was no substructure. It's just the pole going in. And it's a bit like, it's a screen, but also some kind of landmark, not landwork. Again, this I'm talking about very, very fast projects. This is they produce, is a Bergamo factory. They produce chairs, and they needed an automatic warehouse of 30 meters high, but then all the other buildings were 10 meters. And they say, Cino Zucchi, this is totally automated. No man works here, and is not a building. The structure is kept up by the scaffoldings. This is a robot going like this. So, and then they were afraid because the surrounding were sort of agricultural. So it was a very, very big building, 30 meters high, and the dimensions were given by the machine. So basically, the aluminum is in the back, is still the structure of the thing. We just did, I don't want to call it the decoration, but some kind of wrapping around with these elements that almost at certain times they do some kind of camouflage. And it's interesting because on one side, they're just aluminum colors, so they just cast shadows. And on the other side are colored in 3 colors of green. The only place where I open it up here a bit, it's to show the interior. It's just a box showing the automatic pallets. And what is very interesting is that from the countryside looks colored, from, let's say, the industrial zone looks more aluminum, but this is a facade at the aluminum side. So these blades are color one side and aluminum on the other side. This is 10 o'clock in the morning, and this is exactly the same facade at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So the color you see is not the color side, it's the reflection of the sun on that, bouncing back. So it's not the, and this effect is like almost a butterfly, and people love it and go there to wait. You know, sometimes you go in some cathedrals and you have this thing. This is like the interior, we have a walkway around. This was a project we lasted 3-4 months between design and realization, so the very fast project. Other fast projects are the exposition. They just called me in November, say, Cino Zucchi, you want to do the Italian pavilion at the Biennale. Again, I will not speak about the content. Actually, today going around, I think I had some strange interaction between what I did and some of the architectures around. And I call it grafting. So this is actually is a quite historical part of the Biennale, is the Arsenale, and I made this big I call it archy funnel, is a bit between an arch and a funnel to get people in. And this was the exposition. Again, he was talking about that Italy is such a layered country that even modern architecture had to, you never find a virgin state. So this was the Campidoglio by Michelangelo before he was there, and this is the project. So in a way, everybody thinks he built it, but actually even Michelangelo's redid the facades of this building and built a symmetrical building of it. Just to say that I love expositions because this was a big model of Milano with all the existing changes, but also some kind of undone plans, like this big round. It was a projection of the real Milano and all what could have been. And what I like about Milano is that in 1943 it was bombed during the war, and actually other bombed cities like Dresden or Rotterdam were built on modernistic plan. A little bit like when you go to Berlin, Alexanderplatz, you know, these very space buildings like this, very. In Germany, they call Plattenbau is prefabricated, so the DDR. In Milano, they chose to retain a bit the old morphology, so the white buildings are modernistic ones, and the gray one are the, so it's Milano, it's, this is the same block. You see, where you see the red tiles of the brick is historical architecture, and you can see modern, and it's a strange blend. You even have Milano skyscraper is called the Torre Velasca, this one, and this is the old hospital you saw before. So Milano is a patchwork between the existing structure and quite modernist building. This was about all cities, you know, this morning we were on top of the cascade, and I don't remember if Alexei or Andrea, you know, he said, like, Andrea, Yerevan was all low, and now they're building this new building. This issue of going high in St. Petersburg or Moscow or London, you have it there. So this was an analysis of, actually this was what was considered the Milano skyscraper. This is the Bosco Verticale, Torre Velasco. We made these stone models about landscape, and we were talking about what is an urban high-rise building. It was the second part. But I just gonna go through where I like exposition design, because you have to think fast and you have to do temporary things that can also for a while host people. Then the Grafton architects, they were two Irish architects. They won a quite big competition in Milano. But when they were in Milano, I made them discover this unknown master called Cacciadominioni. Nobody knew him until, let's say, 20 years ago. Now everybody, all Europe is going crazy with Cacciadominioni. And they say, Cino, this is actually me with Cacciadominioni 100 years. And I did more than an exposition about him, a very monographic work about just one of his buildings in Milano. I did this sort of Milano cake is panettone. It looks a bit this way. And inside you have, the colors are not, this is a bit overexposed, but we did these beautiful models of just one building and put all the original drawings. And these are inverted things. So pavilions, many times, they let you think fast. They are interpretation. In this case, is my interpretation on somebody else's architecture. This is a negative print of the atrium of this house. It's only about this very strange house, which is all funnily made. I will not explain it. So it's like this. And again, I'm going from the small scale to the big scale. This is the same people who did the arch you saw at the Biennale. They got affection to me. They produce metal. They say, Cino Zucchi want to do our own showroom in Milano. And we did it even without building permission. They had an existing door. So we did this. Of course, they wanted also to show how good they were in treating metal. So I did this big opening door that can be closed and open. And it's all made out of very brass material, very thin. So for once in my lifetime, I have the, you know, this is the handle. I got them crazy to do this double serpent handle, but so it was, you know, good craftsmanship showed even in modernistic times. Some details are very sophisticated, this interior. Of course, it's all made of the raw metal. And this is all the kind of oxidation of metal they can do. So a shop as a way of experimenting a bit architectural themes that sometimes you apply to the bigger scale, sometimes they look like small architectures, sometimes for the sake of it you can get into craftsmanship. But they say, for example, they asked me in one day, you know, we are working with these stone people, can you do a table with stone inlays? I said, maybe I don't like so much a table with stone inlays. I will design these cylinders. This part is a laser cut with metal, and then this is sort of inserted like powder stone. So, and this, I say you can use them a bit for everything, to put things on, to put them on the streets, because they're very traffic street and so on. And then I did the door. I designed 12 of these doors. This is just 2 of them, and each one is for every month, so they change it every month just to refresh it, and they show their materials, because their specialization is oxidation of material. So the thing is there, but it can change every month. And they like it very much because they refresh the image of the showroom. Okay, so this was just-in-time design. Then I said, maybe we can use some more sophisticated modeling. Today, everybody's working with BIM. In certain things, I don't like BIM. We could have a debate about BIM. Everybody wants BIM, but it's very mechanic in certain ways. It's a, you know, database for all the things. But then we won a competition in Bozen, with a German-speaking part of Italy, is near Austria. And we had to do offices, a retail. They produce mountaineering apparel, so to climber, and there was a very, very big logistics. No production, but just big logistics. And the project was so fast, we designed things, but what is called on the track design, basically, we designed not every detail, but we gave guidelines to the people who were offering all these facades. It was all a big skin of metal, and these were the rules how to cut and to get a continuity between holes. This is an exemplification. So instead of doing us all the details, we gave almost generative laws to do it. So this is a construction, and we were still designing while they were constructing it. This is the side on the highway that is very close also because of sound reason with all these panels. Basically, they're oxidized aluminum panels. And then we built the biggest rock climbing thing of Europe, and it's 25 meters high, and it has a big sliding panel so you can see the mountains. It's very, very successful. And this is Reinhold Messner opening it. He was also in the jury of the competition. This is the youngest Italian climber, and the offices. And the back side is all the logistics where the trucks go. And again, super sophisticated in terms of energy. We produce more energy than what we consume, so we even give some energy to the city. And this idea of camouflage, I took this picture from the other side of the highway, and you see this is the typical industrial building in the industrial zone, and this was the last building of industrial zone looking at the landscape. And I remember when choosing the color, my client said, but are you sure to use this bluish color, Zucchi? This is from our collection 2001, 2002. Now we're going on the brown. I say, okay, we are doing a very landmark building. You produce mountaineering, so it looks like a mountain. But you know, this is also something you cannot not see from the city, because it's the first building you see when you enter Bolzano. And what I like is that the color is not green, it's blue, because when you have warm air, everything becomes blue. So it's very camouflaging in a way, but then it's also a big landmark building. So it goes back and forth for being a strong presence to almost blending in with the mountains. Embed flexibility in time in urban projects. Many years ago, we won a competition for Helsinki. It was a big dismissed railway scale. They had this bridge which was 50 meters high, and they asked us to urbanize, to make some urban structures, because they were reducing the railway yard. and they were changing a bit the infrastructure of the station. Let's say this is housing, this is with a very little parking, they're very ecological in Finland. The thing is that this was the existing bridge. We tried to urbanize the bridge without cutting in all of the stations. So basically, this is the existing station. We extended, we made some covered walkway and some kind of almost Italian piazza here, because I said, if they call us all the way from Italy, we have to give this coziness of Italy. And these are high-rise buildings, and this is housing. I go quickly, this is the model. And this was the first scheme, I would say. And so this was planned as a business center, housing and retail, and because you have a lot of connections here. Then Nokia got wrong with smartphones. Everybody in Italy had, 15 years ago, we had a Nokia 310, and now nobody has a Nokia in this hall, because they didn't understand smartphones, so the Nokia went down. The economy of Helsinki went really down, so they call us after that. They liked our work, but then what was supposed to be a business center didn't have the market anymore, so I say, why don't you make higher tower, but we will make them offices up to here, and then housing on top. So we did a detailed master plan of only that part. And what is interesting, that we had some kind of mixture. So the offices were up to here. It's a master plan, it's not a design, but housing. And then a lot of, since Helsinki is very cold, a lot of common spaces inside. And even if it was a master plan, they were afraid of going high. They had a bad experiences, high-rise building. So I say, why don't you show the people you can make high-rise building beautiful? And said, that's not my job. It's the job of the architect. This is a master plan. No, make a sample design. So they asked us to do a sample design. And this was a famous, Gulliksen is a textile designer. So we did this sort of collages. And in the master plan, this is the office part. You have some walkway going to the subway. The bottom part are offices, and the top part are housing, and this is a private sauna, because all the Finnish people are doing saunas. And after the sauna, they go out in the cold, because they like it that way. I don't know what's so exciting. Yeah, maybe it's exciting, and some common green. So it's housing on top. Here in the renderings, you don't see very much the difference, but this is housing, this is offices. And we also try to demonstrate that you can have a lot of different architectures. So this is not a real project. It's just a simulation of possible scenarios. And actually, we did 2 sample buildings. And when I was packing up the model, we dismantled it to send it to Helsinki. And I realized my real project was not the towers, but the public space. So I said, in a way, the difference is that it's some kind of public space wrapping people around. And then I thought, Italians are good in doing towers. This is the famous San Gimignano, full of towers. But this is the central square of San Gimignano with the towers. We are good also in doing this space which will really feel cozy. So this is a bit of a joke again, but I think that we try to give an urban base to a set of towers. I told you it was long, and this is Tirana in Albania, and after the fall of, let's say, they almost had a dictator, I said, like this, they had so much illegal growth that the whole Tirana augmented by 1-2 million people, the population, but everything is with no plan. So the nucleus of Tirana is actually whereas under Italian fascism, because it's very close to Italy, you had this big monumental axis. It's very classical, but not so big. But then all the rest, see, it's all these illegal houses, and almost they have no streets. So the project had to do with this area, which was a railroad and also with the river, but it was a big project, it was a big competition to do all of it. So it was the administrative center. And this is the end. This is called the Boulevardi, this one, and it ends up here. So the whole city, actually there was some kind of old nucleus, which was almost a bit like a market square, is somewhere embedded here. But as you see, all these are single-family houses with dirt, no roads. So it's very ambitious master plan. We did this big green esplanade, which went from an axis. We kept an axis on one side with the opera house, with the administrative buildings, all the way to this river. So the main urban space is there, in a way metamorphosizing an axis into some kind of more natural setting. The landscape was done by Gustafsson and Porter, they're very good English-American things. So see how ambitious it is, it's big. And this is the fabric of all things, but so there was a new part in this mist, but also they asked us, how do you do with this? So we did some kind of plan where you had to cut normal roads, because this is a fabric, it is there, but also could include what is there. So we accepted a certain degree of leaving what is there, you can all tear it down, maybe just including them in some kind of wrapping around, and maybe in time metamorphosing it. So a kind of acceptance of what is there, even if you need a new structure. It's an interesting case of planning, accepting what is there. This was a big work for Milano, and you had 9 different railway yards. It's a bit like Helsinki, which were big, and now the railroads do not need them as big. This is Milano, which is in shape a little bit like Erevan. Of course, we don't have the Ararat. We have actually we have the Alps. In good days, you can look all the way out the Alps. And this is the railway ring, but the idea was to turn the railway yards into urban pieces with a lot of green. Again, I will not explain it. It was just quite general ideas. They called architects from different parts of the world. They called Mad, they called Benedetta Tagliabue, and so on. So this is the project by Rem Koolhaas Fondazione Prada. The idea to make a new urbanization into very large single, the fact that big industrial areas and railway yards, which are dismissed, they can have a big, the city modifies in different ways. One is more substitution, one is master plans. Today, the only place you can do large master plans is where you have a unified property, and this was the case. So this was the largest one. All this was a big railway yard. The railway is still there, but the idea is to make a big park surrounded by buildings. And also we work with, what's his name, the French famous landscape designer. These are existing buildings in a railway. Basically, we used what is called phytodepuration. Since this transformation, they go over 10, 15 years, we use planting things and using these water lines to make the trace of the park, but also to do some natural remediation of the soil, because many times the soil is very polluted. So it's like something, not always the end state. Many times you do big master plans, but then today the things change very much. So it's a bit of a sliding door urbanism that can be incremental. For example, keeping some existing building for temporary use, and then in the final master plan, so this would be the final state, but it will be in 10, 15 years. Test components are adapted to different situations. So this would be, a newspaper called me on Saturday afternoon and said, Cino Zucchi, everybody talks about co-working or how this, can you send us in 3 hours your idea about new ways of living? I said, come on, in 3 hours, it's a bit quick. I said, everybody talks about co-working, but not everybody do communal life. So I said, I will just sketch a component. Everybody likes a private terrace. And can you mix rather more traditional typologies with more innovative ones? So some of them were for single mothers or fathers, or communal living or more traditional. They can be changed a bit. So it was just a sketch of 2014 I did in the afternoon. And then for some reason, some of these principles were applied into a project we did for the Expo, and it was a very, very dense project of high-rise towers, for the employees of the expo, so it had to be super fast and super cheap, and then they will give it in social housing. We're doing also now the Olympic Village in Milano, not we, SOM are doing it, but we say we build something for an event, and then this will become social housing. In this case, we did the master plan is not ours. I think it's a bit too dense. But then I convinced the client, actually the original master plan had a tower here, said, come on, let's make some open space. I convinced the client to take away this tower and to put a little quantities all over the other towers, but at least to make some kind of common space, and which was this, because that was too dense in my situation. But still, this density, you know, when you go to Chicago, you have this, it's called the Chicago Mile, this incredible denseness of skyscrapers. So I said, there's two towers, they're almost touching. I said, let's make some kind of stepping back to see the sky. And again, they were planned to, how can I say, the living room was a room. In a way, during the expo, you didn't need a really living room because a lot of people were working together, and that will become the living room. So it was always planned with a second transformation to transform it into social housing. And it was one of the cheapest projects I did in my life. It's only plaster, so it looks, in a way, monumental, I would say, but actually, this is during the expo. They have all these people coming from all over the world. So it's a sort of test of how people occupy the spaces, you know, and each population brought a bit almost its own habits. This is just a photographer going around to picture all the employees of the expo who came from all over the world. This is very interesting, I find, how people use the same space in different ways. And then this is our building, this is Cucinella, and actually it's all done of plaster, so we try to unify the windows. See, we didn't have any money even to do big windows, so the windows are not so big, but just to say that to give some kind of scale and unify, so you see the windows, but they almost camouflage a bit into this bigger structure. And I think it's interesting, see, so these are the single floors, and these are the loggias, to generate, in a way, when you see monumental Soviet architecture, you have this, we call it the giant order, very big pillars which apply to the facade, and even housing sometimes is very monumental. And on one side you say, what is the use of this very big column to go all the way, even if the apartments are like this? Then when they did the more modernistic, they were like this. But sometimes you feel a need of it, which is not just the expression of typology, but it's something like giving to the city. So there's a sort of monumental tradition in housing, which we don't find in Europe, which I find it interesting, because it gives certain classiness to the city. Again, to give the scale which is intermediate between the one of the cell and the one of the thing. What I'm proud of in this cheap program, that I managed to do a very big portico on the ground. So the building it can be seen from the highway, but it's like a cascading down, and I changed the color, and I made a cut so the sun, when the sun sets, it gives some light to the square. I try to make it very transparent. This is like metal, and it's very generous. And now this a picture. Now the children, they play hide and seek very much. It's a very generous portico on the ground floor. Transform existing structure into new entities. This was the former Car Museum in Torino, a building from the 60s. And then we did an addition and renovation. I try to go fast because we like to give some space to the debate. So this is the new part. So it's an existing building, but it's quite a heavy transformation. And the existing building was like a drive-in with a car. We covered the court and we made it into public space. So this was the original section. It was this rampart, and you got in, but the entrance to the museum was into the courtyard. And this was the new. So you keep the building, but the transformation is quite big, the upper floors. And this is the original facades, but then it was closed on this side. So we just took down a bit this thing, and the backside is all new. And being a car museum, it needs also to be a bit showing some, I don't want to say car aesthetics, but a bit of new things, is all glass, back-painted glass. We had very, very little money. Zadid Museum in Rome is like 9,000 euros a square meter. This is 900, so it's 1 to 10. So again, many times you have to do a lot with very, 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 very little money. So we decide to use these glass facades to wrap all the safety stairs. We covered up the court, and this is used for events. It's very well used. This space, they use it, and also they make events, they rent it, so even it makes some money revenue. And this I want to speak a bit slowly about it, because it was a former plant, gas plant, also energy-making plant, and then Lavazza, you know, the coffee people, they stay in Torino. Torino is a very regular grid city, and it was very close to the center, but it was, the quarter was so-so, and they made a competition. So this was the original double block. So this was an internal street. You had a gate here, and we did the sketch, and basically we kept these two buildings. This serves as the Lavazza Museum. This is an office complex. This we didn't get built. We left it more as a garden. A public square, a restaurant. So the cafeteria, we took it out so everybody can use it. A design school, and we used the existing one as a event center. So it's not just the offices, and integrates a new building with two existing buildings. This was the original state, and this is the building, and you see we keep these two buildings we exist. It's an interesting case of interaction between a rather, you know, Lavazza is a big corporation, so they need some kind of important building because they have clients from all over the world. So you enter here, you have a big atrium. Here are all the offices, the showroom, and so on. This, you enter to the Museum Lavazza, a big garden with an underground parking for everybody. And this is the event center in the former factory, and this is the design school. This is a typical, just very big office. This is on the main square. And as you enter the existing building, this existing building restored, we added this sort of trilithic structure to get it in, so the entrance is there. This is the landmark of Torino, is this Mola Antonelliana. So the entrance unites the new building with the existing one, it's a blend. And this is the other facade on the square. And Torino has very interesting public spaces. We try to do a facade of an office building with some kind of three-dimensionality, and also is not imitating historical architecture, but I don't like all glass buildings which just reflect what is there. So the facade is very modular, but has this kind of pattern. And you see, so this is one floor, and I asked to do opening windows so people, because today you have all these sealed offices. I go quickly. So the facade really reacts to different light. By excavating, we found a Romanesque basilica under the existing industry, so there was a drama because the parking was there, and we managed to change the project, change the parking, which was not easy, and we took up one of the courtyards, and now you can see the remains of the basilica from the streets, and all the little children can go. The entrance, this is the main atrium, which is very public, and we did a piece of a bit Baroque architecture, which is the main stair, and the elevators are there. So this is public, this you have to register is the employee's place, and the entrance to the museum, which is from the same atrium. So this is like a cover public square. And then the stair, since the existing building are low and the building is higher, it mediates between, the space goes up, but people like it very much. Why? Just because it's a bit like Piazza Navona, you know, the Spanish steps. I mean, in a way, I was consciously Baroque, let's call it for a moment. It was not just an escape stair, but because of that, it became a public space. So everybody goes up and down because it has these very funny looking spaces. It's every time the site changes very much. I don't know. I think sometimes you need form to gather people, the offices, and they have very good resources, you know, like this, and the gym. I mean, the The level of comfort, the employees, they can work all with wireless or with very nice terrace. In the summer, they all work here. And I go quick. They have the museum, it was very well designed. And Lavazza in Italy is very, very sedimented in the ideas from the 40s and the 50s. This is a deformed thing, but just the central park square and Caso. And actually, the park is open to all the neighborhood. So all the employees, they go there maybe to smoke a cigarette, but then it's used by the neighborhood. I made this fountain. And now the green came really up, so it's like a jungle. So, and people in Lavazza say, thank you, Cino Zucchi, you convinced Giuseppe Lavazza to make the cafeteria out of the building so we can open up the umbrella to go out. This is very important. American companies do all this very enclosed, like temples, Google. In this case, it's a landmark building, but it's very open to the city. And that's, you see, this is a neighborhood party, and all the little children go there. And I really design, I don't believe in social engineering, as I said before, but I really made 10 centimeters of water because I said, all these fountains, you can never go in. And I thought if you were a kid, you like to. And so I saw that in a way, this was not planned, but in a way it was thought. And when you do something good, people they end up using the spaces. Okay, and this is we wrapped around the existing building with all the escape stairs. We made a portico. And this is the existing building with this more specialized conference room. And then Lavazza asked me also to design the foyer. And you have this sort of coffee place. And this is used very for parties, existing Caro Ponte. It's one of the most, in these days they have a big event, is rented. It's, in a way, it's a warm space, but very flexible. We managed to, they use it for all kinds of events, for concerts, for things. It works very well. I think it's really create a place. And this is the cafeteria, which is open to everybody, so it's very good food. And so it's not just, and also, you know, since Italy, the population is going down, very birth rate, so we made places for couples to kiss, and maybe they marry, and maybe they make kids. So we're very romantic also places. You don't want to, everybody, you want to just, okay. Traditional practices in new ways. This is a residential project in Milano, very next to the big development of Heinz is a very international thing next to the Bosco Verticale, you know, center of Milano. But we had to do a side dish, I would say. They built this very big Cisapelli skyscraper. And so this is the new center of Milano, you know, this Bosco Verticale is somewhere here. But then the fabric was even this scale. So we built this building, which we feel is a sort of mediator between the new architecture and the old one. And in certain cases, it has some kind of, I don't want to say traditional, you know, this, which actually is quite successful, but a very international style, and the nearby buildings. So one facade is all made out of stone and copper, and it's very urban, almost, I don't want to say monumental, but it has this sort of stately thing with very big atriums you can see through. And the other side is a garden, so it's a total double-sided building, and the nearby building are from the beginning of the century, this kind. And then another also built these two buildings, so that way. And this side, now, this is full of green today. It's very deep balconies overlooking the courtyard. So a two-sided building. The atriums, you look back to the existing architecture. This is the reflection of the windows of Cisapelli on my building. And again, this is the, say, the urban side and the garden side. And all these windows, these are the bathrooms, these are the stairs, these are the, I mean, each window is functionally related to what is in. These are the terraces on the living room. But in the end, I cannot deny a building from far away is like a texture. So I took these pictures to understand this almost texture quality of the facade. And these are the nearby building for another guy. And the master plan gave some middle-rise towers. So they're quite different in typology. And because of sun orientation, it was, this is south and the backside was north. I managed to cut the existing master plan so to let the sun on all the sides, but all the, let's say, the balconies on the outside. So everybody today wants a lot of balconies, but they don't always go with the historical architecture. So these are quite generous balconies which wrap around the building, and the atrium connects into building. I try to go as quick as I can because I understood I really went beyond my time, because I tried to put together a bit this theoretical dimension to showing. This was a former factory in Laveno, and it was 90% covered. It was a ceramic factory, and then they had a big master plan. They did a competition, and we won this part. So it's not so easy in Italy to have a waterfront like this. I mean, the houses were on the waterfront. Gustafsson Porter did the garden, and this was all a factory, and we built these houses which are south-oriented, but they also have a very nice look on the, and this is a new public square. So, but then the village was quite small, so it's new architecture with a lot of generous loggias, because it has a beautiful lake view, but then it also has to fit in this sort of old neighborhood. And some interior features, this is the back of it. So again, all this is 2 levels, the portico, but you enter, these are shops, but you enter the houses from the back, and this looks a bit like a little village on the back, so it's 2-sided. Very quickly, a project we just finished in Bordeaux, in France, and it's an office building, a quite unassuming office building in a big development. And Bordeaux is all built of this yellow stone. This is the old Romanesque cathedral, and we picked up this yellowish color in a concrete which has powders of stone inside, and also some kind of, I will not to explain it, you have this thing, it's called the trompe. It's a French speciality in architecture. So in a way, the entrance is a bit modular on this kind of things. And I'm a very learned person. In the 80s, I wrote a very scholarly book on Milanese courtyards. So I know very well the classical rules. We were talking today about classicism, this issue of academic teaching and regionalism. It's also in Yerevan is very important. So I applied what I know about what is called entasis, all the rules. But what is interesting, and see, this is again, you have some references to local architecture, but of course the building is modern. But the gymnic I did, the windows are totally rectangular, but then it's like a warped surface like that. So the back is rectangular, so the window is straight, but the front is a bit of an entasis, like a column. And this gives some kind of vibration, almost classical vibration. This is actually prefabricated concrete. So it's a nice retro motive to a quite modern building. You see it here. This is straight and this is curved, the entrance. This I jump. These are all the housing. I put too many projects, so I jump it. This is, in Bologna, is free market housing and social housing. We have 2 different standards in terms of sale. So this is brick and this is plaster, but I always try also to give some dignity also to popular housing. So they live next to the other. Acknowledge the importance of public space. So these are a bit of, I think public space has some kind of independent unity. So in this case, it's a neighborhood park in a kind of boring part of Veneto. It's a small park, and we did all this white tongue, I would say, that it's used, so they expected just a park with benches, children games, fountains. I try to integrate everything into a single design. So this is, say the amphitheater is this one, the picnic place, the benches. So it's one single move which unites everything. This is the children game. And it actually is suburban boredom, but people like it very much. They go there every time. So even this sort of mediocre suburban landscape can have some kind of hype. We go toward the end. Very, very big factory, Alfa Romeo factory. I don't tell the whole story, But we got to do a little piece of this very big master plan, Gino Valle, which was an important Italian architect, work on it. Very dense. This is an office building. The overall traces are by Gino Valle, but then we planned, so it's social housing, these two, and free market housing because they overlook a park. It's a bit more precious area. Actually, when I do social housing and free market, I always like best the architecture of social housing. I don't know why, things comes out better. This is the social housing part. They're like 20 by 20 meters towers. And actually, the pillars are here. You know, the typical Milanese peripheries looks like this. I tried to make something which is not that different from that. But then using materials, the terracotta tiles, colors, and a bit of changing what you can, I gave it a bit more. So in respect to the existing one, it was all piled up. I like the idea that the children say, I lived on the 7th floor, and you don't need to count. You have some kind of idea of identity of the single floors in respect to the overall thing. This is the free market housing, which is a bit more precious. It has a stone facade. And the idea that when you touch the ground floor, you have to smile a bit to the city. This is just, say, Cino, Cino, everything very nice, but we don't know where to hang our clothes. It's just somebody who make a caricature of it. But then I realized Milano has a Romanesque architecture, like this, but also a neo-Romanesque. Today we were talking about, you know, the architecture of the 20s here is somebody coming from Russia with the academic, and then try to find some detail in the local Armenian churches. So this, and Italy is the same. At the end of the century, everybody tried to find national identity. In this case, so this is architecture from the turn of the century, which have this motive of white stone and brick. But it's interesting that I did not copy directly. I realized it after a bit. So this is the most famous Romanesque church in Italy, Sant'Ambrogio, and this is the Caccia Domignoni I was talking about. And this is Cino, this is me at 7 years old, and Caccia Domignoni, and he wrote to my baby Cino, this is a dedication, because he did the house for my father. So I copied a bit the Caccia Domignoni and a bit, no, I didn't copy, this I skipped. Again, now this is actually Caccia Domignoni, 100 years old, calling me up, he's an old architect, said, oh, Cino Zucchi, I saw your building, but you know, you young architects, let me tell you, I'm a slalom maker with plans. So he photocopied the plan of my building, and he did a correction. He did with white correction paper, and the red is by him. And he said, you can make it better like this. So I have an autography by Caccia Domignoni, try to make my buildings better, but then I didn't have the courage, they were already built. But I like this quotation, you know, talking about originality. What do we do with the knowledge of others? I think you should not copy just to get the prestige, but many times you can also refer to previous things without, you have to make them yours, I would say. The Portello, what I really liked about the Portello is the public space. It was a really bad neighborhood, a dangerous neighborhood, but now people, when kids go there. Talking about adopt durability as the key of sustainability. Everybody said, what is sustainability, what is sustainability? We use a lot of new technologies, but today I think the fact that the building can overlast long is a key. We build all the technologies, but technology gets obsolete very well. So many years ago, I won this, I was 1995, so I was quite young. I won this competition in Venice. It was the existing, looked a bit like the Bauhaus, so it was just a very big factory in its Venice, but it's the Giudecca, the outskirts of Venice. This was an existing school, but all this was totally a private, autonomous area. So the garden of the school went all the way against this factory. It was not public at all. So this was the existing situation. And then the master plan, we opened a new canal. We kept a lot of buildings, this existing school. So it was an idea of a mixture of all the new buildings. And this is Google Earth. So this is a canal we open up. All these are existing buildings. It's a mixture of the two. I did the master plan and I did 5 buildings. Very bad clients, so I will not tell you all what could not have been done. But this is an existing industrial building reformed. So some of it is the restoration of industrial buildings. Some are new. For example, this one could not be kept up and is substituted with this one. So it's new, but it's sort of, if you squint your eye, it's not that different from the existing ones. Because Venice is very, so these are existing industrial buildings. It's a mixture, it's a strange mixture of new and existing ones. And, you know, for an architect, building in Venice is like saying you're going out with Nicole Kidman. You feel, you know, it's difficult to deal with Venice. It's such a, this is a new canal we open up, and everybody has its own boat, the new canal. It gives a bit the creeps for an architect to build a new building in Venice. He had a big occasion. So in this case, for example, you had two boat thing. You know, we were talking about garages, you know, and these were, it's called cavane, is existing boat depots built over the building. So many of the foundations, we used the wooden foundation which were existing, and this was an existing building, and then we substitute this, and it was a dead end. You walk through the boxes, and we open it up. So we even open up a gallery, and in Venice, you just need 2 meters to be public. And this building we kept at the chimney is they say the one who more, it's popular housing again, it's very cheap housing, but it's the one for, this is the passage, the new passage we cut through the existing building, is the one that from some reason got more mediatized. I don't know why. I did 5 buildings, and actually only have 3 kind of windows. These are kitchen and bathrooms. You can see the kitchen by the 9 because for the gas, and bedrooms, and it's the closest things we could do to historical architecture. And in this case, you have a lot of places to hang your clothes. How to do a house in Venice? You take a piece of, we call it butcher paper. You put on a record by Fabrizio D'Andrea, he's a local folk singer. You think of your first love and cry a bit, and you draw the windows where the teardrops are fallen, and that's very easy. Did we try to do Mondrian or picturesque? I don't know yet. My problem was to do something that looked today, but is not that different from, it's not imitating this, but it's not also, you know, like the Towering Inferno. It was very difficult also because of. And what is funny, that people start to sending me pictures of buildings which sort of look like it, and then I start a collection. I have it like on internet. So this motif of gray plaster, white windows, and like this is, I was in Vienna some maybe 2 years ago for competition. They said the Zucchi windows. I think they were referring to this building. And I said, oh, come on, these are not the Zucchi windows. And the other day I was in Politecnico, and I found these models, and I think some professor of first year, they gave, you know, to the students, oh, study the Cino Zucchi house. And for me, this is a shock, because I remember the night of the competition drawing, and then I find myself all these clones of the house. It's very strange. And people identify me so much with this project that this is the same guy who did the caricature as me, all dressed up like Venice. But again, everybody thinks I'm original, but that this is the building I copied from. So everybody says the Zucchi windows, but this is Gabetti e Isola. So I don't mind this idea of copying. It depends how you use it. You can go to hairdresser, say, do my hair like Lady Diana, or do my hair like Keith Richards, you know, the bass player of Rolling Stones. But then, okay, I can do my hair like Keith Richards or Lady Diana, whatever. But then, or there's a song, it's called Your Dark Sunglasses Will Not Make You Lou Reed. This I love, you know. Everybody thinks just putting a leather jacket, you become Michael Jackson, but, you know, you have to digest it. So this building got somehow, I don't know, somehow it's a very local building, but the alien took my mouse invented another planet. It got sort of reproduced, even if it's a Maribold building. And this is my last words. This is Adolf Bene, Der moderne Zweckbau. He says, this is very important to me, while the functionalist looks for the maximum possible adjustment to a goal as specific as possible, the rationalist is looking for the greatest chance of compliance to the largest number of necessities. Nothing more understandable for the rationalist to put an emphasis on form. Form is born with the establishment of human relationship. The lonely man, isolated in the midst of nature, has no formal problem. The question of form arises together with the union of more individuals, and form is the condition which makes possible men living together. When you go to the Republic Square, you can say, oh, it's formalist. In a way, classical architecture, or these columns, do you really need these columns? But then there's a moment where everybody recognizes it as public. Of course, we're not in the same condition. We don't build the same way, technological way. Maybe we don't have the same budget. But Lavazza project is really adopted by the people. During the COVID, the space you saw became the biggest vaccinatory center. So it was resilient in that sense. And when I go there, I don't feel like I was the author in a way, but I don't feel like the author of it. I think it's like when you feel well in a jacket, and to feel this building, the Lavazza people really identify in it. Giuseppe Lavazza thanks me, Cino, you know, now we are, everybody who comes here, really, we feel like it's our home. I think an architect, you could talk about subjectivity, but when a building gets adopted by a city is really the greatest satisfaction. Then you do it, but then it's not yours anymore. Sometimes it happens, sometimes not. So I want to say that in the end, we love the city. I feel Europe like a big city. I like this idea that Central Park are the Alps. I mean, I think we should be global today, but in a way, the world shrank. So Europe is different enough to be different neighborhoods, but it sort of feels also because with EasyJet, you can go from one place to the other. And just I'm sorry for being so long. I felt obliged. You know, it's Yuri's fault because he said we also need to talk about theory. I was here to showing just some projects, but then I charged it a bit with the first part. So I demand your, how long we went. I hope there's some time for discussion, and I thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Cino, and this is the really fantastic example of how you are merging theory with the practice. Now I start understanding that. Thank you for that. Maybe we have questions to Cino. It would be nice if someone could ask something, because I have a couple of, but yeah, please.
Thank you for the lecture. And usually contemporary architects criticize big utopias of modernism, like Chandigarh or Brasilia. Do you believe that your ambitious master plan for Tirana or other big projects will not be considered a flop failure in coming 50 years, for example? How do you treat that big scale?
Actually, again, I went very quickly. I did not totally criticize. I was very interested to call both Brazilian and Chandigarh because were cities built in one moment in time, in very short. Usually cities, European cities are very layered. Of course, cities, they have a moment where of expansion, even, you know, so it's not always flat. You have moments of big transformation and moments of ordinary living. I was not actually total criticizing Chandigarh. Actually, Chandigarh works quite well. It's interesting because in Chandigarh, you say, what do we do tonight? Let's go to Sector 17 and take the V1 road. The names are a bit futuristic. Sector 17 comes from, you know, the block. And what is strange is that in India, the streets were also the place where people had markets and is the animation. In the conception of Chandigarh, streets are only for cars, and actually these are not blocks, they're like super blocks. And also in Brasilia, the road is separated from urban life. In this case, you know, in the center, the main roads have bars, maybe you have cars tolerate. In this conception, and you have pedestrian paths, that still feels a bit strange because, first of all, you have to use the car all the time, but the life is inside these sort of sectors, so you enter and exit the sector 17. The city is not so continuous, it's continuous by car, and you have the zoning. But in certain cases, it works quite well. I mean, Brasilia and Chandigarh are quite different from each other. I find Chandigarh not bad at all. What is interesting that a certain kind of purity by Le Corbusier, even aesthetics, people even, I did a house in Milano now, and the other day they opened up a bar, and the guy built some structures, and they put it on the facade of my buildings, but they were a temporary structure, but so ugly and so out of tune. They said, come on, maybe if they call me, I'm not denying, you know, when bars build those structure outside, but the way they pasted it to the building, in terms of colors and geometry, I should show you the pictures, it was totally, I don't want to say respectful, because I like buildings which survive. When the Portello housing, many times I see, and I see what people put on balconies. When you see Swiss architecture, they take these pictures which are perfect, totally without people, glass parapets, immaculate. But then if you go after, depends on the car, I think the architecture should absorb some kind of disorder. Many times, modernistic plan assumed that people behaved in the way they thought they would behave. You know, when you plan ahead, I invite the girl, I put some good records, and then under the bed I put an open page of Baudelaire like this, then I prepare some pasta, and then some meat. But maybe she's vegan, maybe she doesn't like rock music. So if you plan anything in advance, the evening will not go the way you want it. So I think we have to make our best. In that sense, the sooner or later you have to make form. It was also in the praise of taking the responsibility to make forms. Because otherwise you say, I'm inclusive, resilient. I think I do. You know, Lavazza is very inclusive with the people. But what does it exactly mean? These words, they keep on recurring, but then you don't understand what is the feature you're talking about. So I was not so critical because they also work. Just, for example, the issue of zoning, anti-zoning. One of the revisions we could make on the plans of modernism is all the industries here, all the restaurants there. For example, the Saleva one has a restaurant, it works fantastic. All the industrial zone does not know where to go at lunch, and they all go there. It's filled with people because it's an industrial zone of Bolzano, but took some new activities. So they don't know where to put people. So anti-zoning, probably in certain cases, we go back to, for example, some old buildings in European cities, you know, now we have an office building and a housing building. Some buildings from the turn of the century, they can a little bit go back and forth from being, not very big offices, but we are talking today in Europe, many times you have office buildings which they get deserted because the way people work anymore, and then their structures. So some people are working, could you reconvert an office building plan today in a housing? It's not that easy. You don't have a balcony, you know, especially in terms of you know, air conditioning and that. So the paradox is, the more an object is specific, the more it works only for the thing. In a way, this last phrase, the functionalist, imagine some kind of tool. You know, I have to open something, or I'm a gynecologist, or I mean, you have very specific tweezers who are only done for medical things. Then you have something you use tools, you know, how to open things. So the more generic the tool, it works for more than one thing. The more specific is specific, but then it only works for the thing. I think that the city is a sort of tool that cannot be thrown away as the other ones. The question is also this idea of how does a building accept new things, because today things evolve very well. I don't know if I answered, but just to say that, and then talking about this master plan, the Finland one, I mean, doing master plans, even since it takes 10, 15 years, a master plan has to have some general choices which are not so functionalistic. The Tirana one was even, I think the competition was even too ambitious. This was a competition. And actually, it's funny because, no, okay, forget it. No, it's because you have also a personal history on the project. But just to say that I was not that critical in reality. We also, we have in Milano a lot of, for example, in East Germany, now unified, you have a lot of what is called Plattenbau, this very housing which are all like that. People hate it. Many times today, you know, they all build forced concrete, the insulation is very bad, so on. But then the typologies are not that bad. I've been in Berlin, I've been in a hotel which was transformed. You also have this, not so much in Yerevan, but these socialist sort of people living in these repetitive things, and some people really never loved them that much, even for architectural reasons. You know, for some reason, they consider a bit boring or a bit too poor. But then we have a lot of them. So the idea, how do we live today with those, in a way, today we live all the layers of the past. I don't know if I responded well to your question.
Thank you. More questions?
Cino, I have plenty of questions for you, but right now I'll only ask two, if I can. All right, first of all, about Lavazza headquarters. While you were digging for the foundation, you said they found some ancient walls and some stuff, right? Yes. So how long did it take for you after to get the approval from the government to build, to actually build a new building upon this old, like, I mean, for sure in Italy it's so important to keep what, like the ancient architecture, right? Yeah, yeah. Instead of building something new. So how long did it take for you to get the approval? We have, it's called the Sovrintendenza, is the office of caring of old buildings and archaeology. Okay, so every time you do a building in an environment or in a listed building, you have to deal with them. And it was totally unexpected. Actually, was the foundation of a building. So the interesting part, it was interesting from the point of view of history, because it was a Romanesque, the foundation of a Romanesque, but it is over the Roman city. In terms of architecture, there was no particular theme. It was just a plan. So, in that case, we negotiated a lot with the Superintendenza. You know, the project could have been blocked, and we negotiated to show the remains. We changed it. Basically, we had to move completely the parking, because it was the point where the Agner parking go. And there was a lot of, you know, many times you have also all these fire roofs like this. And as you see, we made some kind of change in a project like this, so we made it accessible. And now actually, I mean, it's not the most important. It's, again, it's historically important and not so much architecturally. So it's basically, you can visit the foundation and tell you the history. So yeah, it was a long negotiation with the superintendents. And the second question, if I can. Could you tell us a little bit how you started? How old were you when you started your own studio? How many architects worked for you, like worked with you? And like just a little bit, how you got your first clients? Okay.
When I was 17 years old, in 1973, I got my high school diploma. I jumped on a bus and I drove all the way to Afghanistan. I remember the mountain Ararat seen from Turkey. So crossing Turkey into Iran, and like this all the way to Peshawar. My kids, I have 4 kids, they say, Papa, did you ever smoke hashish? And I said, I have to be honest with you. I cannot say in my life I never smoked this, because I have a lot of friends smoking, so they put, but then I promise you I never bought one, and it was true, okay, so. At that time, the Italian freaks went all the way down to India to prove new experiences. It was very strange. I was crossing Iran like this. When I came back, I didn't know what to do in life. My parents got really angry with me going back. So architecture was a discipline. It kept the things open. Why people like architecture? Because it's like a kaleidoscope, is many things. So the risk of architecture is everything and the contrary of everything. So in a way, I didn't feel any mission in my life to be an architect. I just want a way to wait to the side, and then I chose architecture because I didn't know what to do. That's an interesting story. Then, after graduation, my father was an industrialist, so the first works I did a bit, you know, by maybe in an office like this. I had the luck to do smaller work for the family. Many times, the first client of an architect is friends or family if you are alone. I worked at some other architect studio, but not that much. Gregotti. So, in a way, I'm a sort of self-taught person. This is bad and good, because if you have a father who's too strong, sometimes you have to kill the father. I did not have that many fathers to kill. So my education is a bit bricolage between American education, Italian historicism, a little bit. It's interesting because it's a bit of a patchwork. Then when we won, the competition in Venice was a luck win, and I became a bit bigger because of that. Also, I became a man because it was a very, very difficult project. Many times project of that scale, you have, you know, the clients. I mean, if I tell the stories of the project, is a continuous negotiation and fight and this and that. So you get big shoulders. Now I have a middle-sized studio. It's like 35 people. I don't want to get too big because it gets too industrial. I still think each project is different. In a way, you have this very academic professor, my colleague, Monestiroli, who said, Cino, but did you design this building next to Bolzano? And I said, yes. But how can you? You designed the Venice housing. How can you do these buildings that are so different? And I responded this way. I said, listen, Antonio, I can understand you like better, you very, you know, the house in Venice. I said, but there's two kinds of artists. The artists who pick a particular theme and they go deeper and deeper, and in music you have John Baez, in the film you have Federico Fellini, I don't know what. And then you have the artists, I said, like Stanley Kubrick in the cinema. He did 2001: A Space Odyssey. Then he did Barry Lyndon, and he did Shining. Each film is very different, and the language of the film are very different. And I think today Herzog and Meuron are a bit this way. They always surprise me, because it's more easy to do a fake Zaha Hadid than to do a fake Herzog and Meuron. I don't know, it's in a way. Then some of the projects are better, some are worse, like songs. But I feel more, I'm not Herzog and Meuron, I'm not, of course, Kubrick, the White Album of the Beatles, but I feel some people, they like to treat each theme as different. Of course, an artist has some kind of recurrences, but when I look back at the buildings, they don't look that alike. I mean, you find some things which are recurrent. Maybe in housing you have this idea of making the facades a bit, not just piling up things. You have things which resonate. But can we be fresh every time? I admire people who change the language as they change it. So that's why I don't want to get the studio too big, because then you become a factory and people expect you always to do the same thing. I don't know if I mean, you asked me my whole life in a question.
Thank you.
So it's a bit hard.
Thank you, Mr. Zucchi. It was a very interesting lecture, very well prepared, and it kept us interested for all those minutes, maybe hours, I don't know. But continuing question by Ashot, I just want to hear your opinion. Everybody here, and I am sure most of people, like the cities which has much historical layers, let's say Lisbon, Rome, London,
most of Italian cities, where going through those cities, seeing the monuments, etc., you feel the layers, and you feel comfortable by passing from one historical layer to another one, from one monument to another monument, or finding a small corner when you can feel you between the walls built 300 years ago and 1,000 years ago, etc., etc. But there is one phenomenal city where I unfortunately never was, but from literature, etc., I know the city of St. Petersburg in Russia. Yes, it was founded by Peter the Great, and it was founded on the let's say desert. Yeah. Yes, and as far as I know from the literature, etc., the experience of people of this city, that it became inhabited, it had this feeling of being inhabited from the very beginning. And it was time of the architect, when the architects were not like now, each one searching his individual solution, etc. They were under the general order. What is your opinion? What is what worked so well there in this city, and what is the difference then between Chandigarh, Brazil, etc.?
I had a slide when I had to cut slides, and one of the last slides, but it was hidden in a PowerPoint or cut, it was by an English architect from the 40s, and he was a quite conservative architect, I would say, and he was one who rebuilt Regent Street in London, the one who goes in a quite classical way. And the name of this book is Good and Bad Manners in Architecture, and in English, the word urbanity is synonymous with good manners. So an urban person is somebody who knows the codes of society. I think that the good part of classicism is to try to find an aesthetic which is not subjective. In this book, he says, can we call a city a union of just different personalities, each one expressing his own personality, or is just a Hepser building? Many European cities, London with all these new skyscrapers, they look like a collection of things. Even the new Milano, you have one, you know, Stefano Boeri, Zadi, this and that. It's very eclectic. And I went to a presentation of Sergei Choban, you know, and he made a book, it's called 3070, something like that. I don't know. It's a bit of an easy book, but he says, you know, the European cities can tolerate, I think, I don't know, 30% of this sort of variety, but the 70% has to be things. There's a very interesting show about Paris was built, I mean, it has medieval Paris, but by Haussmann, he was a baron. After the Comune di Parigi, the revolution of 1871, they built boulevards, and some boulevards were done against barricades. So they even have a military. Today, the main Paris is boulevards like this. And I was, again, with my wife, go in Paris with a motorcycle, and she said, but Paris looks all the equal. All the Haussmann buildings are white, they look the same. It's even boring. Milano is a bit more varied. And the beauty of Paris is this, all the buildings are the same height, they have the same profile because of building rules. What I'm trying to say, that a lot of fascination, even of historical cities, is also some kind of uniformity. Because of the stone, many times is also because of the material used, you know, you see a lot of, because of the way, the solution, how you make a roof. So sometimes it was intentional. Sometimes it was the homogeneity of the old cities was a little bit given that the way you did things, that's the way. Like if you go in a souk, the way you do shoes, you don't have all these kind of funny shoes you have today. So many times we are nostalgic about historical. It is true that we like variety, but not too much variety. It's the kind of layer more the variety. And in Italian squares, many times the material unifies. You can have squares. They have a Baroque building, a medieval building. Like in Bordeaux, one building was Baroque and one building was Romanesque, but the stone, in this case, all Bordeaux is made out of this yellow stone. Going back to St. Petersburg, my mother used to talk about St. Petersburg, and in my dream, St. Petersburg was always full of snow. I had a dream-like images since I was a child, and then maybe 10, 15 years ago I was to St. Petersburg, and the first time I got there, I got a bit disillusioned because to me it's like it was a Pushkin fable. It's something, I did not know the real city. It was like some kind of northern city. Then, Prospettivaneschi, like this, it is true that for my sensibility, because each of us carry almost children memories, sometimes St. Petersburg is a bit monumental for me, even if it's a beautiful city. The scale of the squares is broad. When you look for the little, like, Latin Quarter cozy coffee, I mean, people live everywhere. Sometimes you need it's a strong thought. You had this, Allison and Peter Smithson, they were talking about Bath in England, and they were also saying cities which are built in one strict period of time, all the same. In this case, we were talking about Edinburgh in England, which was built all in things. So, Haussmann, Paris, is not the same. The story is very different. But you have moments of cities where they boom, and they all built in the period, and they're also fascinating, because you really feel there's some kind of common phase. Even here you feel a bit that, you know, Yerevan is a very planned city. I mean, it's like Palladio in I mean, you have the statue of your main architect in front of the cascade. I never saw an architect keeping such an important role in a city, even sitting there with the big tree. It's a pleasure to see it. And it's planned. So I'm not again at all this planning. I think that today, variety, a lot of suburban disorder. You know, when you go in the outskirts, you just see a factory, this and that. It's just a highway with many things. So I would go back to strong design. Architects always, we all dream of some Peter the Great, because an architect thinks he's democratic, but he would like a power say, I want to do this. Le Corbusier went to Stalin, he went to Mussolini. In the end, in their heart, architects would like one person say, let's do it this way. Today, Saudi Arabia maybe is the place, you know, like this. So I don't think there's just one kind of beauty. The point is that whenever, with the students, I say, I will make an example to make my point. But then anybody can make another example of something which works well, which is the contrary of what I'm saying. No? So I said, let's say it's logical that retail goes on the ground floor, so strong commercial streets, they all are on the ground. I have two examples. One is called, in England, you have a medieval city where all the shops on the first floor, and then you have, in Boston, you have Newbury Street, which was a residential quarter, and you don't have a ground floor. You have single townhouses on top. So I can myself take two examples which function well and go against this idea, no, retail should go, be continuous, go on the ground floor. So even the beauty of cities is different. Last night we were at the hotel, and there was a 35-year-old Armenian who, when she was 2 years old, she went to America in Los Angeles. So she was the first time, after 33 years, she came back to meet her family. It was when you drink a late cognac, Ararat cognac there. Then we were talking about Italy. Oh, where you from? You're from Milano. And she said, I went to Florence, I loved it. Rome, so bad. And then I went to Venice, it's so boring, you just stay 2 hours in Venice, what's the sense of Venice? And to be sincere, you say, wow, but Venice is the most incredible city in the world, how can you, okay. So it was opinion, an Armenian got to Los Angeles, she loved Florence, and she said, Rome stinks and Venice is so boring. So, but in a way, Italy is good because you have Rome, Florence, Milan. I mean, in a way, Italy is the land of you have 10, 15 cities which are quite different one from the other, in scale or monumentality or like this. So I think the beauty of St. Petersburg is not comparable to the beauty of Venice, of course, and it's a very strong, beautiful city. So to end it up, I don't think we can have a general rule for academic, in a way we could simplify academic, classical architecture against participatory, all this use like this. For example, in Italy, Mussolini we are politically against, but is undoubtedly the strong regimes make architectures which are very present today. When even here, the socialist time left, architecture, they're very recognizable collectively. Maybe they're a bit monumental, maybe we do not the same today. In a way, politically, I'm against Mussolini, but I cannot deny some of the architecture Mussolini time are important buildings, and because they did collective buildings, social, these programs, schools, ministries, which are today quite strong. So maybe we need also, the city is like a music. You need strong pieces and melodies and landmarks. It's like a bit cooking. No, I'm joking. It's not just cooking, but I don't know. I can talk for hours and hours. You can switch me on and off. It could be until 10 o'clock.
Thank you. Thank you, Cino. It was a fantastic lecture. I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Ես ում շնորհակալություն հատուկ հայտնեմ ազգային գրադարանին, որ մեզ ընդունեցին եւ ոչ միայն ուղղակի ընդունեցին, այլ մի փոքր խնդրեմ երեկվա շատ արագ ու շատ մեծ բարյացակամ լուծեցին եւ մենք կարծում ենք, որ դեռ շատ կհամագործակցենք.
I just for conclusion, I am not an architect, but I am the librarian here, and okay, I learned a lot. And also 2 words, sustainability and inclusivity, are very usable for libraries as well. But I understood the most important thing, that the architecture is also makes possible to influence on population. So you're thinking about everything, where to kiss, where to, so it's nice idea for the library design, and maybe I think that in Armenia for libraries, we need new architecture, and it's not library for architecture, but maybe it will be architecture for libraries. Thank you for your lecture.
Many years ago, there was a competition for the main bibliothèque in Milano, and I was very young, I was in a jury, and there was a lot of debate with the librarian like this about choosing the right things. And then Bollese Wilson, he's from Australia, but he works in Germany, and they did a very interesting bibliothèque in Münster, who was this. Then for many reasons, this went out of budget, out of this, and they redid the same competition 2 years ago, in Milano, but for another site, so they cannot reuse the architect. And I was also in the jury for the second time, and we had a big debate with librarian, which was the best projects. And it's very interesting when you together have to decide this thing, and how much, if you do a space that is too flexible, it can become everything, then it can become everything, but it's nothing. If you do it too strict, so it's a balance between some elements which need to be also representative to be welcoming people, and some places which are flexible, because today also technologies change so much that in a way the project done 10 years ago was obsolete now. In Helsinki they did a new bibliothèque, which is incredible. Did you see the bibliothèque? It's amazing, because in a way it's a bibliothèque, but it's like a public building, and you can do 3D prints, so you really understand what is a bibliothèque in the age of information technology. So this is one of the fields which keeps on more changing, so let's go on with the debate. The thing is that once you do it, it should last more than 10 years. That's the point with architects.